All Tom Hanks wanted was a quiet vacation at home.
This is what I need, Carol. I need this.
Welcome to Mayfield Place. A typical street in the Burbs.
Morning, Walter.
Where nothing much ever happened.
Walter's dog just took a dump on Rumsfield's lawn again.
Until the Klopeks moved in.
Klopex?
Klopex. Klopek. No one goes in, no one comes out.
Neighbors from hell.
It was a nice place to live.
He said he thinks the Klopeks are evil incarnate.
Well, you're much too smart to fall for that, aren't you, honey?
But now,
Carol!
you wouldn't want to visit there.
Ray, this is Walter.
The Burbs.
I'm going over the fence, and I'm not coming back till I find a dead body.
Ray, do you want him to take your family, kidnap them, tear their livers out, and make some kind of satanic pate? We found Walter!
We got a real problem.
I hit the gas line, I'd run!
God, I love this street.
Tom Hanks.
I think we are overreacting.
No!
The Burbs. It's one hell of a neighborhood.
Hey, honey, I think we should move.
So Joe Dante, a director I've always liked. I mean, he brought me Gremlins when I was at the right age bracket. He did this movie called Inner Space when I was around the right age bracket, where Dennis Quaid got shrunk into a machine and then injected into Martin Short. He did this movie called The Explorers. He's worked almost exclusively in genre cinema his entire life. The Howling, so he's one of the boys as far as I'm concerned. The Burbs is a special place in my heart too, because it's one of the first times I remember going to a movies on a date, kind of. In the innocent sort of holding hands, I have a girlfriend, but I'm in grade 8 type of date. Right?
That's adorable.
But exactly. So I have precious sort of attachments to the movie. So right away, I'm going to come at The Burbs as a fan. I like The Burbs. I think it's a charming movie. Revisiting it all these years later, not only was I hit by a pang of nostalgia just from thinking of those awkward, cute sort of first kiddie dates, but I was unprepared to see Carrie Fisher.
Huh.
I love Carrie Fisher. I always loved Carrie Fisher. Obviously, she weighed heavily in my childhood for her participation in Star Wars, but I also think that she was a really, funny writer and, comedic talent, and it sucks that she's no longer with us. And I'd almost forgotten. I always sort of thought of The Burbs as that Tom Hanks comedy, but Carrie Fisher plays Tom Hanks' wife, and she's actually very funny in the movie. The whole cast is uniformly strong. I love me Bruce Dern as the military-obsessed neighbor. I even like Corey Feldman as the teenager or the young, college-age kid who's renting a house in the neighborhood but finds his neighbors more entertaining than his television. And I think it does a really good job of sort of presenting this warm community and then showing you the ugly underbelly of the community when the Klopeks move into town and they are sort of greeted with a lot of contempt and suspicion. And the movie gives us a lot of reasons to not like the Klopeks or to think that they're sinister. But what we're seeing, or at least what it seems like we're seeing through most of the movie, is the neighborhood goes to war on the newbies, on the outsiders. And I think that there's some fun satirical teeth to that. But then everything changes at the ending, in the third act of the show. So I guess that's where I'll pass the ball to you. Do you think that The Burbs still works as a successful comedy? Or do you think that the shocking, explosive finale of the movie maybe sort of took the teeth out of the satire?
For all of these movies that are quote unquote comedy horrors, this one was definitely a comedy. I feel like it might also be the most horror. I really enjoyed The Burbs quite a bit. This is actually my first viewing. It kind of struck right before my time. And I will say, although the movie was released in 1989, this is a 90s movie through and through.
Right.
It's right up there with, like, I don't know, Angels in the Outfield or some other, hey, this is what it's like living in the 90s type not period pieces at the time. Obviously, these movies didn't think of themselves as of an era, but now looking back at them, they clearly are. They clearly represent the time, I think, very well in terms of, hey, this is how we felt about ourselves in this time. You know what I mean?
The safety.
It's not like this. Watching this isn't going to make you go, I know how people lived in 1989. It'll go, I know how people saw themselves in 1989.
Yeah. The safety of suburbia and the double-edged sword of suburbia. And I think that's... I still love the movie, but I think that's the maybe missed opportunity of it. If the Klopeks weren't, spoilers, legit serial killers, if the neighborhood had just created this paranoia around them, and by these misunderstandings and these coincidences, basically found them guilty. There's an amazing speech. I think it's actually well rendered by Tom Hanks. Towards the end of the movie, he's blown up. He's caused an electrical outage. He's blown up this guy's house. And he sort of realizes that this has just gone out of hand, and he lets it all out in this incredible speech, and then throws the gurney in the back of the ambulance and demands to be taken to the hospital as he has just been exploded. But really, if he had been taken to the hospital and the credits had rolled, the movie would have had its satirical edge. It would have been a commentary on suburbia. Instead, all of a sudden, the Klopeks turn super evil. There's a big climactic fight, another explosion, and they're all hauled off to jail. And this position is vindicated. Even the neighbor, who's sort of been the guy who was throwing all the fuel on the fire. I can't remember the
instigator.
He's the instigator. Artie's the name of the character. I can't remember the name of the actor. He's one of the few actors in this movie who didn't go on to do bigger, better things. He says to the news people who are there interviewing him after everything's going on that if you move into suburbia, just know that we're watching. And it kind of vindicates this sort of position of fear thy neighbor. And that's unfortunate because the movie kind of started in this love thy neighbor place. It reminded me of growing up in a small town in Alberta, and that itself was a double-edged sword, but we knew by first name the people that lived to the left and right of us and the people who lived across the street from us. And we liked each other, we got along, and that's becoming a rarer and rarer thing. And again, I think that the movie would have had a real point to make had it sort of pointed at suburbia as saying, look how it treats outsiders, instead of turned into this sort of goofy over-the-top spectacle. But I'm at war at it because I also kind of love the goofy over-the-top spectacle too. So not every movie has to be super dark and super harsh. And again, this movie, much like Ghost Town, much like Some Guy Who Kills People, just really wants to put a smile on your face. So is it fair to criticize a movie for the movie maybe it could have been? I don't know.
I mean, if we're not criticizing it against the movie, it could have been, what are we criticizing?
I suppose. Again, I like the movie that we have. I like the sense of humor in the movie. I love the performances throughout the movie. It's interesting, Bruce Dern, the guy I was telling about, he's got this young trophy wife, and he looks
I was really waiting for the trophy wife to jump on Corey Feldman.
No, never happened. But that's the thing. We would not like that guy. And Bruce Dern is, if you want someone to play a slimy villain, Bruce Dern is so good at that. But I really like seeing him as this guy who genuinely contributes to the adventure and is kind of lovable in his oafish way. Great sequences like when Art and this guy go over to get Tom Hanks' character to unleash the next step in their scheme, but Carrie Fisher scolds them and sends them away, and they act like these two little kids being admonished. Oh please, Mrs. So-and-so, can't he come out and play? Artie literally starts kicking dust with his sneakers like with a shamed little boy, and it's just a really warm and hilarious scene. And the movie's full of those, and for that reason, it's impossible to hate the movie. I like the movie. But again, if you take away that last 5 minutes, it's also a smart movie. With that last 5 minutes, it's kind of just a silly movie.
Now, that's interesting because I actually I'm not going to say I come at it from the other direction. I felt like the last 5 minutes, it almost feels separate from the rest of the movie in a good way. They're like, it's a movie, what you gonna do? Of course, they were actually bad guys. I feel like the speech that Tom Hanks gave had as much impact as it had. They might have been right at the end of the day, but they were right for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I still, like, the message still came through to me in that moment. It's still, like, he was saying, like, oh, we're the bad guys, we're the crazy ones, we're the ones that are crazy. And they were, and he was. The fact that they turned out to be evil at the very end didn't really undercut that for me, because at the end of the day, it doesn't justify all the stuff that they've done. No. It didn't justify how they acted. It didn't justify the things that they added onto their conspiracy that actually were not part of it. There's a neighbor during partway of the movie that goes missing, and they're like, oh shit, these new creepy neighbors must have killed him. Yeah. They didn't. They had helped him. They had legitimately helped him for, regardless of what other evil they might have done in their own time, they were legitimately collecting his mail and slipping his toupee back amongst his belongings.
Yes.
And taking care of other stuff while this guy who turned out had cancer had to go away to the hospital. They were wrong about that. They misjudged. It's a little goofy thing that the Klopeks were actually, Frankenstein-esque, or I guess maybe more Addams Family type. I don't know what you want to call them. They were horror family cliche. But the messaging of the movie, I think, doesn't necessarily, at least for me, get lost in that little stinger.
Right. And again, the movie just wants to be fun and light and goofy, and it, for the most part, is that. So, again, it's something that occurred to me upon revisiting it that might have been a missed opportunity. For the rest,
possibly, and that's I guess what I'm saying is that if I watched a cut of this that just had the Klopeks moving away, feeling bad, and Tom Hanks being like, okay, I guess we're going to the lake now, finally, sorry. It would have felt like a very, like, almost the same movie to me.
Right. So
which maybe that's just lending credence to your point that you could have just run with this thing that you had done so well throughout the rest of the movie of being a satirical comedy about suburbia and not had to worry about entirely exonerating your protagonists throughout.
But then at the same time, I could be sitting here thinking if they made that movie, I'd say, they overthought it. This is the grass is always greener on the other side. I don't really have any serious problems with the Burbs as it exists. I think I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this kind of is the end of the era of Tom Hanks as like the comedic leading man. He'll still do comedies now and then. I can't remember. This was right around the time of Joe versus the Volcano, but when Big came out and Bonfire of the Vanities was that big broad comedy that kind of failed for him, he sort of then became, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump, serious actor Tom Hanks. And I do think that he's a great actor. Things like Castaway, he's genuinely blown me away. But
Green Mile.
Green Mile's
just
great
the Stephen
movie.
King episode.
Yeah. But sometimes I miss the old school goofy Tom Hanks. I do think he handles this material really well, and it's deceptively difficult because that character could be seen as kind of a shitheel. In a way, my narrative of it ending with him being hauled off to the hospital and then likely prison could have worked if not for the fact that Tom Hanks makes him so likable. That ending would just not sit with anybody well. He wouldn't feel like he'd earned it. He's not such a bad guy. He was just misled. It was a misunderstanding, He's really genuinely good at playing that and at selling really difficult constructs. I think that he elevates fantasy premises like Big and Splash because he can sell you that he can sell you pretty much anything because he's Tom Hanks. So
Tom Hanks, the actor's actor.
Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of the last really of the great tentpole comedies. I think maybe Big was before this. I can't remember now, but it's right in that neighborhood.
I want to say that Big was after it. I mean,
it's somewhere
watch
in this
this.
neighborhood.
If you talk for one more minute, I'll have the answer.
Yes. Okay. Also, Joe Dante is not... He's still with us. There's rumblings of a Gremlins 3, and he did a few years ago a family horror movie called The Hole, which if you want, you can actually watch in 3D, which is, a family-friendly sort of jump scare type of genre thing. But classic Joe Dante, like The Gremlins, like Inner Space, even The Howling. It's a goofy movie, but I kind of love it because of the werewolf stuff in it. I'm always up for another Joe Dante movie, and this is another one of those high water marks for him, I think.
Big came out 1 year before The Burbs.
1988?
Yep.
There you go.
Which is weird because the character of Big Tom Hanks was supposed to be an adult, and I get that part of it was him playing at the mindset of preteen. But I got the feeling that even adult Big Tom Hanks was cast as a much younger character than suburban dad Tom Hanks from The Burbs.
Right.
And both read equally genuine to me. So again, congratulations to Tom Hanks for being the actor.
Yeah, you can sell anything to anybody. Check out The Burbs. It's really worth your time.